Back into it. Kickback Jacks on Battleground, football in focus for a Thursday. Got Joe Sirera with us in the news and record HSXtra section. Also tonight, let's see if I can get this bag here. So got a little trick or treat time for Joe.
Oh, nice.
So nice
I like
reward.
it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It'll work good. This also makes a nice container later on too if you want to save some stuff.
Very handy.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Good stuff. So it is Halloween. It is Kickback Jacks for a Thursday. Kids night at Kickback Jacks. Also football night back in the back room at Kickback Jacks. Got Joe with us. 2 weeks left in the regular season. Got Ragslick Grimsley Friday night. How do you guys at the HSXtra pick that game?
We both like Spencer Turk and I both like Grimsley in that one. That's the game I'll be at.
What about Ragsdale, the competition level they'll give Grimsley? Looking for a pretty competitive game here? So Ragsdale shown improvement in recent weeks?
They've definitely shown some improvement. I think Alston Hooker's kind of settled in as the quarterback. They kind of figured out what they're doing on that side of the ball. They cleaned up some of the special teams problems they were having earlier in the year. I think they're well coached enough and there's enough talent there that they'll keep it interesting into the second half, but I don't see anybody derailing Grimsley at this point. You never know what happens when you go to Marion Kirby Stadium next week, but I don't see anybody derailing Grimsley until
Looks like one of the big differences in that game may be what the Ragsdale defense does. That's probably one of the keys to the game, what their defense they do against Grimsley's offense. I think Ragsdale's offense, like we said, is coming around, they can score some points, but how much resistance can the defense show the Grimsley offense?
I think it's a little of both. I think Ragsdale is going to need to play an error-free game in terms of turnovers, not giving Grimsley a short field. Grimsley forces a lot of turnovers. It seems like every game Sincere Burnett is picking off a pass, recovering a fumble, doing something. Other guys on that team getting into it too. They can't afford those kind of mistakes, and they're going to need to take advantage of a Grimsley team that doesn't turn the ball over much. They need a Devin Boykin pick six, him jumping a route. They need some kind of a big play like that, I believe, to kind of get them going. If they commit more turnovers than Grimsley and don't get in good field position, I don't think they can beat Grimsley.
And probably one of the keys here too, who knows, but Grimsley had the week off last week. Maybe some teams that often helps get better, but for Grimsley, they were rolling along. Maybe an off week might have slowed them down just a tad. They've got to get the rust off, a little bit of rust maybe, and get inserted, get ignited again, get going again.
Yeah, it's different for different teams. It kind of depends on your situation. If you've got guys banged up, that week off later in the year can really be a huge help. Can get some guys healthy, sit them out for some practices, get them ready to play and approach the playoffs. The thing with Grimsley is they're probably going to have 2 off weeks in a span of 4 weeks because more than likely they're going to have a first round bye in the 4A playoffs. I don't see any way that they would have to lose to Ragsdale this week and Page next week for that not to happen. As long as they're first or second in that conference. Last year as a second place team, they got a bye in the first round. I think I see that happening again. You do want to stay in a rhythm when you've got momentum, but I don't think they'll have any trouble reestablishing momentum this week and going to that game next week. They're not going to have any trouble getting up for Page.
No doubt about it. That might be their year to really exact some revenge on Page for all these years, bring some back. You think about that. If a team had the last week of the regular season open and then they had that break for the playoffs, and if they got a first round bye, those guys could actually go off almost a month before playoff action again.
We had that a few years ago with the weather situation.
Yeah.
For a number of years, Southern Guilford was the odd team in the Mid-Piedmont 3A, and they always would play Ashboro the next to last week, and then they'd have that last week off. And Northwest would have been dealing with that this week and this year, and after they finish the Metro, they're going to be playing Ashboro out of conference on November 8th.
And a strange place for a game like that, too, really strange.
Just 2 conferences with an odd number of teams. Kevin Gillespie, the Ashboro coach from Page back in the day, knows all those folks at Northwest, and it made sense for scheduling for both those schools.
What about Dudley at Southwest? How do you see that one shaping up? I mean, Dudley put up 56 points last week. The offense got in gear, and then Southwest is another team that's finished a lot of improvement recent weeks.
Yeah, the interesting thing here, this is a huge game for both teams. Dudley needs to win this game and get some help if they're going to win the Piedmont Triad 3A. They're going to need either Parkland to beat Mount Tabor this week or Southwest to beat Mount Tabor next week if they're going to get back in. Even if they close out with 2 wins, they would need to beat Southwest, and then they go to Western Guilford. You would think the Panthers would have a very high likelihood of winning that game. The crazy thing to me is Southwest Guilford, it's all out there for them.
Oh, yeah.
If the Cowboys win this week against Dudley and next week against Mount Tabor, they're going to be your Piedmont Triad 3A Conference champions, and that's a great position for Chuck Doak's team to be in as his first year as a head coach. Jaden Rogers settling in at quarterback. They figured out how they want to use Quantez Poche occasionally as a quarterback, but in a lot of other situations. The receivers have been playing well. The defense has been pretty solid all year. That's a good football team, and it's all wide open in the Piedmont Triad 3A. Mount Tabor is the leader right now. Parkland is still in the hunt. That's an interesting conference.
Interesting, too, because if you're Southwest, that's exactly the way you want to sell it to your players right now.
Oh, yeah.
This is what we can do. Let's go do this.
Yeah, it's a 2-week season for them to win the conference championship, and frankly, I can't remember the last time that the Cowboys won a conference championship in football, and in that league with Mount Tabor, Parkland, and Dudley, that would be very impressive.
What about this kid, Chase Roy from Parkland? Roy last week, quite the athlete. He missed 7 games last year due to ejections and suspension. Missed none so far this year, senior year. But that kid last week showed us an elite athlete on the field for Parkland.
Yeah, he might be the most impressive wide receiver I've seen this season overall. Good hands, ran the right routes, managed to get open in almost every situation, dangerous with yards after the catch. I mean, he had a great game. The unfortunate thing for Parkland was once Camion Scheller's starting quarterback and Scott Walker's backup got hurt, they had to put Rory in as a Wildcat running back, and that gives defenses a shot at him. The one thing I thought was interesting is the way Parkland uses him as a receiver. They're smart in that they never put him on the line. He's always offset in the slot. So even if you want to try to get a jam on him, he's going to get a 2 or 3 step free release coming up to the line, and you're going to have a really hard time jamming him at the line. And that's what a lot of their offense or throws to him are predicated on, is getting him off the line with a free release, and then just running the route and the quarterback moving around Shell or Walker and finding him. And boy, when he catches the ball, you hold your breath if you're the defense, because he's tough to bring down. He's fast. He's got some wiggle. He's tough.
And there's so much space where if he finds that ball, it seems to be just a ton of space available for him to go to work with.
Yeah, I think they do a very good job scheming to get him running where either someone has cleared out for him, or they're looking for gaps in his zone, or he's just beating people one-on-one. But yeah, when he catches it, it always seems like you said, like he's already open and he's got room to run. And boy, if you're the defense, you do not want him running in space.
What about the uptick of Northeast Guilford? Now, that seems to be a big plus out on High Cone Road.
Yeah, a great job by those kids. And Earl Bates, this is his 3rd year as coach. We knew he could coach. The last year he was at Moorhead. They go 3 rounds into the playoffs. They win at Havelock. They go to Rocky Mount, almost knock off the eventual state champions with a team that had some talent, but not anywhere near, I think anyone would agree, the talent of the teams that they were beating. Then he goes to Southern Guilford for a year. They go 3 rounds into the playoffs. There's no doubt that he can coach. The kids have bought in. They've stayed a little healthier this year. That's been a big key for them. But there are some really talented kids on that team. Anthony Harrison on both sides of the ball is a lineman. He's a tackle on offense.
Running back is turning it up.
Trayvon Hester, he's only a sophomore. I mean, Coach Bates said that he is a true tailback, kind of a throwback to some of the runners that Northeast had back in the day when Tommy Pursley was there. He's the guy they want to get the ball in his hands, but they've gotten good play from the quarterback too. They've done a lot of things well. They're going to finish the regular season 9-2. The 2 teams that they have left are teams that are struggling in the Mid-State 3A. They're going to be 9-2 going into the playoffs. The thing that they need right now, the Rams, is they are the biggest fans in the world of Western Alamance this week and next week.
Oh, yeah.
They need Western to beat Eastern this week, which is a possibility. That's a rivalry game, but if they knock them off, then they would also need Western to beat Northern Guilford, because they need a 3-way tie, because if Western beats Eastern and then loses to Northern, then it's a tie between Eastern and Northeast, and Eastern Alamance wins the tiebreaker on that one. They need that 3-way tie, so they're Warrior fans the next 2 weeks. They want that great kicker. They have Josh Carty making big field goals and extra points. They want the Warriors to win out, because that would more than likely give them a share of that conference championship.
And against Northeast, Carty is about all Western Alamance had. It was pretty much their offense against Northeast for the most part. Yeah,
there have been a few games this year where he's had to carry them. They lost a ton of talent the last 2 years to graduation. They're still strong. I mean, and Jeff Snuffer's a great coach over there. He's done a great job. Hal Capps before him had a great program there. The 2 Alamance, or Eastern and Western in the Mid-State 3A, are going to be strong every year. It's just a matter of how strong and which one is a little bit up on the other. But that's a good program. But Josh Carty is the best kicker in the state, maybe in the country.
What about the mid-season resurgence of Southeast Guilford? Offensive line's back together again, and they seem to be right where they want to be this time of year.
Yeah, it seems like they've kind of found their identity. If there was any doubt that they are going to be a team that tries to punish you with the ground game, that plays defense, it's going to capitalize. If they can force some turnovers, they're going to bring blitzes. They're going to pressure you on defense. They're going to make you make plays to beat them. I think that's a lot of what they've done. Getting people healthy is huge, and part of it was their schedule, non-conference, was brutal. You look at the three teams that they lost
Scotland
to
County,
going into the season.
Dudley,
you're talking about
Grimsley,
Scotland County, Dudley, and Grimsley. Between the three of them, only 4 losses. So I think Kennedy Tinsley, the Falcons coach, was telling his guys, hey, there's no shame in who we lost to. It's all still out there for us. They're going to win the Mid-Piedmont 3A. They're probably going to get a high seed for the playoffs, and they're going to be at home for at least 2 or 3 games. If they keep winning, they're right where they want to be.
You look at Grimsley, as we go toward the playoffs, thoughts about these projected playoff seedings. I saw Grimsley on projections seeded actually number 1 in 4A in the West, and saw in that same scenario there where Grimsley could be home maybe 2 or 3 different weeks. It'd be a nice playoff run for them because they get to bye the first week. Home for round 2, home for round 3. They could maybe seeing possibly East Forsyth by round 3, and then maybe on toward maybe Scotland County by round 4. Just depends. You got those would have to come true, but there's some interesting layouts there right now.
Yeah, and you're never sure with the Scotlands and Richmond County and those folks, and even the Metro 4A teams. Some years, some of them go east. Some years, some of them go west. But Grimsley has to feel good about the position they're in. If they take care of business this week against Ragsdale at home, and then they go to Marion Kirby Stadium and win against Page, 10-1. I don't see how they wouldn't be, if they're in 4A West, how they wouldn't be a number 1 seed.
And it helps them too that East Forsyth's lost a couple of those conference games. That's going to knock East Forsyth down a little bit.
That conference is Central Piedmont.
I would say
4A
that's one of the toughest in the state.
Yeah,
other than Winston-Salem Reynolds, anybody could beat anybody any given day of the week.
East Forsyth is 5th in that conference right now. Davie County has had a great conference schedule. We saw a little bit of what they were capable of when they knocked off Page to open the season. They're strong. West Forsyth is strong. Glenn has done a lot of damage in that conference this year. And it's funny because Antoine Stevenson's teams at Glenn in the past, it's been wide open offense, air raid, just slinging the ball all over the place. Now they're winning with defense.
Yeah.
Part of it is they've got a really good defensive end, a junior, Javari Ritzy, who's being recruited by pretty much everybody. He's not quite KJ Henry a couple of years ago from West Forsyth, but he's that kind of body type, 6'4", 6'5", 220, runs really well. Motor is on all the time. He's made that defense really strong. And then Reagan knocks off East Forsyth last week, beat him for the first time in school history since 2005 when Reagan opened. That conference is wide open. They're going to beat each other up. You got to hope, if you're one of the teams in that conference that's going into the playoffs other than Reynolds, that maybe you lose some games, but you don't get beat up physically. But that conference will wear on you. West Forsyth, we know what they did to Dudley to open the season. We know how East Forsyth beat Grimsley. That is a very, very tough league.
And what about the top 4 teams that would go the deepest for our county teams? Who would you be our top 4 teams from the county who go the deepest in the playoffs?
I got to go with Grimsley, obviously. Dudley, I think, is getting better. They still have a few things they're trying to iron out in terms of avoiding penalties, not making mistakes. Kickoff coverage has been a real issue for them from the games I've seen. They've allowed some really big run backs, and you do not want to give people good teams that you're going to see in the playoffs a shorter field. They've got to clean that up a little bit. Even if it means pooching the kicks or doing something different, I think they might go to that. Those are 2 teams. Southeast Guilford is playing really good football right now and has the confidence from what they did last year. And then Northeast Guilford. For Northeast, a lot of it is going to depend on matchups. They don't want to. I don't think they want to see a really high-powered passing team like Eastern Alamance.
Yeah, you don't want to see a really tough second-round playoff. You want a fairly level first-round game, not an extremely tough second round. You want to see it get stronger as the rounds go on. You don't have to go on the road several miles around. He's done it before, knocked off Howard, like you said, but still in the proper setup. You want to see a fairly decent team in the second round you can knock off and beat and maybe just advance as you go along.
Yeah, and you've got to figure that they may end up seeing Eastern Alamance or Western Alamance down the line or Northern Guilford. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities there, but when you run the ball effectively like they do, and they've really balanced up their passing a little bit better in the last few games, they've been able to throw the ball a little bit more, but when you can run it like they do with their offensive line and play defense defense, you're going to be in playoff games.
And they've got Hester, plus that Kobe Perez kid's a good athlete, too.
Yeah. Earl Bates, the coach, said that he thinks he would start for a lot of teams, and I wouldn't disagree with that. And that offensive line, led by Anthony Hairston and some of the other big guys they have up front, has really been doing work. That's a good football team, and a team that if you're a conference champion and they happen to finish second, you're thinking, I don't want to see them in the second round of the playoffs or third round. That's a team that with that guy coaching them and with the confidence that they've gained, you don't want to mess with them in the playoffs.
We got some big games this week, some big games next week, too. Next week, you've got Grimsley at Page, Eastern Guilford at Southern Guilford, Northern Guilford, Western Alamance. I mean, it's going to be even bigger maybe next week than this week.
Yeah, you mentioned Southern Guilford and Eastern Guilford.
That's a determiner right there.
Yeah, that is more than likely. It's depending on what Southern Guilford does this week when they play Southern Alamance. That game could be for second place in the Mid-Piedmont 3A, could be for third, could be for fourth, but Southeast is going to win that league. It's just a matter of sorting the rest of it out. And Eastern Guilford, Southern Guilford is a huge game for both of those teams in terms of playoff seeding and where they're going to go.
You know, I thought back to that game today for some reason. You have memories of past games. You had Eastern Guilford, Southern Guilford. The first game I remember seeing as a big, hard-fought game was back when Scott Loosemore was there. It was a Friday after the fire. It was crazy. How about that fire today that hit Eastern Guilford Thursday. But Loosemore is still in the mix because he's at Scotland County hanging out there these days. But that'll be interesting next week. Some big games there. Let's get down to some other notes. What about Coach of the Year? 2 weeks to go. Who's the Coach of the Year for you right now? For the county.
Earl Bates, followed very closely by Darrell Brown. I think maybe Darrell Brown doesn't get enough credit. With him, I think it's more body of work to build to this point. Earl Bates, too. I mean, he took over a program that was really struggling, and in 3 years has them contending for a conference championship.
He made those guys at Northeast. You guys are much better than you're taking yourselves out. You're putting yourself down. You guys are much better beating yourself up. This is a good team, and you do some good things here at Northeast.
It's changing the mindset, changing the culture, and I think he's done that. The kids up there, when you talk to them about him, about that program, they feel like they've thrown the switch. They've made that change, that they're a force to be reckoned with now. And you know, they've got some juniors, and Trayvon Hester, their running back's a sophomore. They've got some talent that's going to be back on that team, and I don't think they're going away anytime soon. And you know, like I said, with Darrell Brown, you got to give credit for the 4-year build there. Winning a playoff game last year for the first time in a number of years was a big step for them, and they're ready to make another big step this year.
So who's the Player of the Year with 2 weeks to go?
Ooh, boy, that is a tough one. I don't think we've got that clear quarterback with the big passing numbers, running back, you know, Reggie Gillespie, Connell Young type with monster
numbers, right?
Yeah, I think this year maybe you go with a defensive guy, and there's some guys that have done some different things. Not huge numbers anywhere, but it seems like every game Milan Summers seems to make plays on offense, defense, occasionally on special teams. I think he's I'll give the defensive guys some props. Sincere Burnett and Quentin Williamson at Grimsley have had a great season. Travis Shaw has had a great season for them. Those are guys I'd look at there. If you want to talk about more Grimsley people, Quan Nora, he might, if I go offense, he's probably my front runner right now, simply because of the way the Whirlies have leaned on him to play ball control, to run hard. He seems to get stronger as the game goes on.
The team and carry the team on his back in a situation.
The Nightdale game, he just kept running harder and for more yardage as the game went on. When the other team was getting tired, he wasn't. And the game with East Forsyth, he had a monster game after getting violently ill on the sideline in the first half with dehydration and cramps and other issues, and he still goes out and runs for 200 yards. I mean, I think I'd give him the edge, but I think this is a year when you've got to give a little respect to the defensive guys too.
What about most surprising teams so far this year?
Northeast Guilford. I mean, I thought they would be better. I didn't think they would be 9-2, which is where they're probably going to head into the playoffs, and you know, with a chance to share a conference championship. I think that's, in my mind, that's an easy one.
What about the team that's been a little bit disappointing, didn't live up to some of the standards we may have expected? Page is down. I mean, I think we knew with that non-conference schedule that they had, that was just absolutely brutal, that they were going to take some lumps. I don't think. And then they started getting injuries to go.
Well, I was going to say they took the lumps physically in terms of that non-conference schedule. Didn't just cost them games; it cost them players. They got so banged up, they got so worn down mentally. I think it really took a toll on them. I think it's easy for me to say, they're better than 3-7. I think they are, even with the injuries. But yeah, I think you'd have to say that they've been a little bit of a disappointment. Eastern Guilford has struggled a little bit, I think, this year. They lost a lot to graduation over the last couple of years. The last vestiges of those guys who went to the state championship in 2016, the last vestiges of that group were gone after last season. They've now had 3 coaches in 3 years. That's never easy. I think Tony Aguilar is doing a really good job there. But I think anytime you've had that much transition, that is going to be really tough. And High Point Central looking like they're probably going to be winless. That's a bitter pill for them to swallow. Wayne Jones just hasn't had the players the last few years. He hasn't forgotten how to coach. I mean, as recently as 2014, 2015, they were going 2-3 rounds in the playoffs when they had some talent to work with. He didn't forget anything between then and now. I just don't think he has a lot of players to work with right now. I don't know how you change that. Some of that I think goes to issues way beyond school and off the field in High Point. High Point is a tough place to be right now, with the socioeconomic situation there, with jobs lost, with crime, with drugs, with gangs. I think that's been a real challenge, and I feel for him, and I feel for those kids who stuck it out there and didn't transfer.
And two, you look at the situation on Thursdays. High Point Central, Andrews both, no more JV football this year.
Yeah.
That makes it even tougher.
The numbers aren't there. I mean, they're really struggling to get numbers, and low JV numbers are not a problem just for those schools. There have been a number of schools that are having that
Northeast has
problem.
canceled their program. Smith, no game tonight because they don't have no kids either there.
Yeah, and Northeast, you're going to go 9-2 probably in the regular season for a varsity team. You can't get kids out for JV. And Coach Bates said that's still a struggle in the school. He said the program, the football program, the kids in the program have turned things around. The culture is different, but in the school they're still struggling to get kids to come out. And why wouldn't you want to play for Earl Bates? Why wouldn't you want to play on a good football team? But you can't make anybody play.
We talked about the playoff projections earlier, looking at Southeast Guilford and Southern Alamance last week. Eastern Guilford gave them a very good game. I think it was like 34-26 or 36-28, close game. But I saw one projection, Southeast versus Southern Alamance in round 1. That's almost unfair.
The same highschoolot.com projections had that matchup last year, and we thought, a couple of people and I looking at it thought they're doing what the NCAA basketball tournament selection committee sometimes seems to do. Oh, let's match Roy Williams with Kansas because he used to coach there. Let's match Southeast Guilford with Southern Alamance because Fritz Hessenthaler used to coach there and had success there. Those things rarely work out, although last year you had Reagan losing to West Forsyth in the last game of the regular season and then turning right around and playing them in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So those things can happen. Southern Alamance, Fritz Hessenthaler has done a job down there. I mean, they haven't won the conference championship. They didn't win it last year. They're not going to win it this year.
But they're consistent.
They're good, and compared to where they were a few years ago, he really has that program playing a lot better. They lost a lot of kids to graduation after last season, and they're right back in contention.
And he's got past the thing with Southeast. Now, that was a big thing the first time they played, the first matchup ever, Fritz versus his old team. But now, it's just go play football and focus on the win. Mm-hmm. Because 29-21, Southeast lucky to win that game against Fritz in the regular season game this year. Very close game there.
Yeah, I mean, he's done a good job down there. It was a great fit for him landing there.
Oh, yeah.
They needed someone like him to come in, instill discipline, settle things down, give them some stability, and geographically for him and his family, he lives about halfway between Southeast and Southern, so a really good fit for him. His youngest daughter is, like her 2 older sisters, a heck of a softball player, and Southern Alamance is a great softball program, so good fit all around for everybody. And Southeast hiring Kennedy Tinsley, it was a great hire by them. I mean, that's a situation
like a
for both
trade that benefited both
That's
teams.
a win-win. Yeah, no question.
What about NC State at Wake Forest noon on Saturday? Jamie Newman should be down. Maybe NC State's got a chance. What do you think?
Maybe NC State seems to be on the quarterback carousel right now with changes there. They've struggled. I think I've got to like Wake Forest in that game.
Even again, running back Ricky Person, I thought State had a running back. What happened to that one guy they had last year? I looked up and he's been injured. So, they've had running back by committee lately because they can't keep guys healthy.
Yeah, when you start getting injuries at this point in the season, it's hard. It's hard to kind of get back to what you were doing earlier if you don't have your players.
What about Virginia Tech at Notre Dame? Big game for Hendon Hooker. See if he comes off an injury, ready to go. It'll be at 2:30 on NBC.
Yeah, I think that's a big ask for Virginia Tech to win that game. Notre Dame, I think, has more talent than the Hokies right now. But Hendon Hooker has played some really good football. It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out at the end of the season. He was in the transfer portal, came back out. Virginia Tech has a transfer quarterback from Oregon sitting out this season as a transfer. We'll kind of see how that plays out at the end of the season, maybe in spring ball, whether Hendon stays. I would think that if he finishes the season as a starting quarterback, that he's going to stick it out and challenge that Oregon transfer for the job. Funny thing is, one of his finalists, one of the schools that offered him and he visited was Notre Dame. So this is two schools that he one that he chose and one that he looked hard at.
No lack of quarterbacks at Virginia Tech, though, right? Plenty of quarterbacks up there right now.
Yeah, between guys who've started and come off the bench, and they were down to Quincy Patterson toward the end of that game with North Carolina that they won.
Glad to have him.
The 6 overtimes, and he played well.
He did.
So it's nice to have that luxury.
Virginia at North Carolina Saturday night. They've got the kid Perkins, a quarterback for Virginia, tough man to keep up with there.
Yeah, Virginia has. Bronco Mendenhall's built that program back up to maybe not quite George Welsh level, but I think he's getting there. I think they're getting more of the kids in state to stay home, and they've gotten physical. They've established toughness in that program. I think that was missing for a while. They're playing good football right now. That is going to be a really tough challenge for the Tar Heels.
It's been fun watching Carolina's coming back this year with Mac Brown. It's just been an interesting year to keep up with, follow that team, because they're in every game.
Yeah.
Not out of any game.
No, it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride in terms of the wins and losses, but as you say, they've been competitive, and I think they've established a little bit more of an atmosphere at Kenan Stadium. There's still some empty seats, that more than they would like, and more than Mac Brown would like to admit sometimes. But the atmosphere from those who are there is a lot better. I think that's the first step in turning it around. I think he's been flipping a lot of recruits to North Carolina.
He flipped another one today. I saw another guy from NC State. NC State's lost 2 or 3 to Carolina even within the past 2 weeks.
Well, and the biggest flip of all, and he made it a priority from day one when he got that job, was Sam Howell, the Monroe Sun Valley quarterback. Everyone knew he was going to be pretty good, a mature kid. He looks like he's about 26 or 27, and he plays like it. Getting him to flip from Florida State to North Carolina was the biggest recruit that Mac Brown has had to this point in this second tenure at Carolina.
You got Appalachian at South Carolina next Saturday, but Georgia Southern Appalachian tonight, big matchup there in that Sun Belt Conference.
Yeah, and if you're App, you don't want to get caught looking ahead to that South Carolina game, because it is all still out there for the Mountaineers. If they beat Georgia Southern and then knock off South Carolina, all of a sudden you're looking at, if they finish the regular season unbeaten, they might be in one of those major bowl games, because they'd have wins over North Carolina and South Carolina, 2 Power 5 teams, as well as if they win that conference. And that conference is more difficult than people on the outside might think. You look at some of the schools and you're like, who's that? Some of the schools are pretty good, and some of them have developed quarterback or coaches that have gone to other places. My alma mater, West Virginia, hired Neil Brown from Troy. Did a really good job there. Scott Satterfield goes on to Louisville. That conference has become, the last few years, almost like the Mid-American Conference, in that that's where Power 5 schools are looking for their next coaches, and there's some really talented coaches in that league.
What about the Titans at the Panthers on Sunday? Panthers really need a bounce-back game after that tough loss on the West Coast.
Yeah, the whole Kyle Allen, Cam Newton thing is getting a little bit problematic for them about how they handle that. I think ultimately you've got to look out for Cam's health first and foremost, because it's not just with him about this year. It's probably about
career,
the future. Christian McCaffrey keeps doing what Christian McCaffrey does. You can't really blame him for the struggles that they had even last week against San Francisco. He had some big runs.
Plus, had 1 call back.
Yeah, I mean, he's having a great year. My only concern, if you're a Panthers fan, with him is that he's getting, wow, it is really coming down out here. That's what that beeping was, and wind. Anyway, it distracted me looking out the window. The thing I worry about a little bit with the Panthers is the number of touches he's getting. If you're Ron Rivera, you don't want to have to answer, well, why didn't you have Christian McCaffrey in that situation? But by the same token, you can't have him touching the ball in every play, because he's in great shape. He prides himself on conditioning, on being ready. But running backs can only get so much mileage on them before the tires start to wear
thin. It's like a lifespan. The lifespan is decreasing.
Yeah, and there are teams in the NFL when Mike Shanahan was the coach of the Broncos and the Redskins. His philosophy was never draft a running back high. You could find some guy in the 3rd or 4th round, and then you run him until he falls apart, and you draft another one. And I think they need to be careful with McCaffrey. I think they need to utilize some of the other guys on that team a little more and give him a little bit more of a rest, because if he's in the game as a decoy, he's still going to get a hit.
Yeah.
So you've got to really manage that. I don't know that they've done a great job of that this year, but I think Ron Rivera is coaching for his job, and I think his first priority is the rest of the guys on the team and winning.
And the thing hurts last week, they gave up, 51 points, and he's in charge of the defense. That kind of cuts the chase, too, with the owner.
Well, some of it was the defense was being put in some really difficult positions by turnovers and by the offensive struggles. I think that's part of it too. But they need to bounce back in a big way, or the seat gets hotter and hotter. And I think Ron Rivera is a good football coach. I think he's a great guy. But David Tepper didn't hire him, the Panthers owner. He has no allegiance there. And I think at some point or another, the first chance he gets where they're struggling, he's going to want his own guys to coach.
What about closing out with Joe Sirera, News and Record, High School Extra section? Best Halloween candy on your list?
Oh boy, I always like some M&Ms.
Right.
Plain or peanut are fine with me. And some of the newer, more exotic M&M flavors, the peanut butter ones are rather tasty. Always like that. I'm a big peanut butter, Reese's Peanut Butter Cup guy.
That's number one.
Anything with chocolate and or peanut butter for me, except Butterfinger. I'm not a big Butterfinger fan. There's a little too much crunch
Butterfinger number
to that.
7 on the top 10 list.
Yeah, that's a little too crunchy for me, but that's where what I would go with.
What about your worst?
Oh boy. I'm not a big fan of the payday bars, the ones with a lot of nuts and not really a lot of chocolate.
What about candy corn?
Never.
No, that's number one on the worst.
Nope, can't do it.
How about the peanut butter kisses? They were wrapped in orange and black paper. They were kind of nasty back in the day.
Yeah, I think they've improved some, and Hershey's Kisses anytime. Give me those.
What about licorice?
No.
No black licorice?
Nope.
What about the little Smarties?
When I was much younger, yeah, now I think I could do better.
But your number one again still is M&M's.
Yeah, I think so.
Peanut and plain both?
Yeah, and like I said, the newer exotic flavors, I can have a little bit of peanut butter M&Ms. They're not bad.
Joe, good call tonight. We're going to see you tomorrow night, hopefully at Jamison Stadium for the game.
If I can survive this storm that's brewing outside of Kickback Jacks here, wow.
Wow, big time rain coming in. Hopefully it's coming out before we leave out tonight. But Joe, thank you so much.
Anytime, Andy. Always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.